The anesthesia hadn't fully worn off when my phone buzzed on the hospital nightstand. I was flat on my back in the recovery room, a surgical drain in my spine, a morphine drip in my left arm, and 7 hours of surgery behind me. The ceiling tiles kept shifting in and out of focus. My mouth tasted like copper and dry cotton. I couldn't feel my legs properly yet. I remember thinking, just sleep, Sarah. Just close your eyes and sleep. But something made me reach for that phone. 4 words on the screen. From Gerald Hutchins, my father's attorney of 23 years. We need to talk. Urgent. I told myself it could wait until morning. I had just survived the most frightening experience of my life. I had a spinal tumor removed. I was alive. Whatever it was could wait 24 hours. It couldn't. But here is the most dangerous part of that moment. I didn't know that yet. And while I lay in that hospital bed, still half unconscious, believing the worst was behind me, my brother Marcus was downtown. He was sitting across from Gerald Hutchins in a leather chair. He had a document in his hand. He had my name on it. And in 4 days, I was going to find out exactly what he had done with it. Before I tell you everything, I want to ask you something first. Where in the world are you listening to this right now? What city? What time is it? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. The people in this community are the reason I was finally brave enough to share what happened to my family. Tell me where you are. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. Because to understand what my brother did while I was on that operating table, you need to understand what he had been quietly planning for years. My name is Sarah Calloway. I am 32 years old. I was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, in a house that looked completely ordinary from the outside. 2-car garage. Oak tree in the front yard. A mother who made pot roast every Sunday without fail. Inside that house, the rules were invisible but absolute. My brother Marcus was the future of our family. I was the placeholder. My father, Thomas Calloway, built a construction company from nothing over 40 years. He started with 1 truck, 1 contract, and $10,000 borrowed from his own mother. By the time I was in high school, the company had 200 employees and commercial contracts in 3 states. By the time I turned 20, it was worth $4.7 million. Dad never let us forget how it started. Every single Sunday dinner, he would hold up both hands. Rough, calloused, the knuckles scarred from decades of physical work, and say the exact same thing. These built everything you see. Don't you ever take it for granted. Marcus always nodded. He was extraordinarily good at nodding. I was the one who actually showed up to job sites on weekends. I was the one who learned to read blueprints at 14, standing beside my father in steel-toed boots while he inspected foundations and argued with subcontractors. I absorbed everything, every measurement, every negotiation, every hard decision. Marcus spent those same summers at the lake. He came home in September with a tan, a new pair of sunglasses, and absolutely zero knowledge of the business that was supposed to be his legacy. And my parents threw him a welcome back dinner as he had returned from overseas deployment. My father watched all of it. He never said a word about it directly. But Thomas Calloway was a man who recorded everything in his memory like a ledger. Every entry, every balance, every debt. I just didn't know he had already decided how to settle them. I put myself through Ohio State on academic scholarships and a part-time job managing invoices for a local contractor, which, looking back, was the most perfectly on-brand thing I could have done. I graduated with a degree in civil engineering. I came back to Columbus and started at the absolute bottom of my father's company. Site surveys, permit compliance, subcontractor negotiations at 7 in the morning in February parking lots. For 3 straight years, I worked 60-hour weeks. I never asked for special treatment because I was the owner's daughter. I asked for the hardest projects, and I delivered every single one of them on time and under budget. Marcus had a business card that read Vice President of Development. He received that title at 26 years old. He had never managed a single project from start to finish. My father gave it to him because Marcus had asked for it at Thanksgiving dinner. In front of the whole family, in that particular tone he always used when he wanted something. And my mother had started crying at the idea that Dad might say no. That was the architecture of our family. That was always the architecture. I didn't fight it. I didn't argue. I just kept working. Because I had learned something that Marcus never bothered to understand. The ledger always balances. Eventually. 3 years ago, my father was diagnosed with early stage Parkinson's disease. He didn't tell us right away. That was Dad. He processed things quietly, the way men of his generation did, until he had already decided what to do about them. By the time he sat Marcus and me down at the kitchen table and explained the diagnosis, he had been managing it privately for 4 months. He looked older to me that night than he ever had before. Not sick. Old. Tired in a way I had never seen on his face. Marcus's first question came before the silence had even settled. So what happens with the company? Like, if things progress. What's the actual plan? I watched my father look at my brother across that kitchen table. It was a long, slow look. The kind of look that carries 20 years of quiet observation inside it. We'll figure it out, Dad said. That was all. But 2 weeks later, he called me. Just me. Not Marcus. He asked me to meet him for coffee at the diner near the office, the one we used to go to on Saturday mornings when I was in high school. He was already in the booth when I arrived, turning his coffee cup slowly in a circle on the table. He looked up when I sat down. He said, Sarah, I've spoken to Gerald. I've updated my will. I want you to know what's in it before anything happens to me. I want you to run the company when I'm gone. I've known for a long time. You're the one who can actually do it. I sat across from my father in that diner, and I didn't speak for almost a full minute. My throat wouldn't cooperate. Then he said, Don't tell Marcus yet. I'll handle that conversation myself. But I wanted you to know. I wanted you to be prepared. I drove home, and I cried in my car for 40 minutes. Not from sadness. From something that felt, for the first time in 32 years, like being finally, completely seen. I had no idea that Marcus had already figured out something was changing. I had no idea he had been watching. I had no idea that while I was sitting in that diner with my father, my brother had already begun building a very different plan for what would happen to that company. And I had no idea he was going to wait for the single moment in my life when I would be most completely defenseless. 8 months ago, I was diagnosed with a spinal tumor. My doctor found it during an MRI I had scheduled for lower back pain that I had been ignoring for months, telling myself it was job stress. It was benign. But its position against my spinal column made it dangerous. It needed to come out. The surgery was complex. A 7-hour procedure with a 6 to 8 week recovery period and no guarantee that my strength would return fully. I scheduled it for a Thursday morning. I told my family the week before. I told my father first. He held my hand across his kitchen table and prayed quietly, just moving his lips, the way he always did when he didn't know what else to offer. I told my mother. I told my aunt in Cincinnati who drove 4 hours just to sit with me the evening before. I told Marcus last. Almost as an afterthought, because we had never been close in the way people pretend siblings always are. He said, You'll be fine. You're strong. He hugged me. He held it slightly too long. I remember noticing it and dismissing it immediately. I had surgery to prepare for. I went under anesthesia at 7:14 a.m. on a Thursday. At 10:28 a.m., while I was in the middle of that surgery completely unconscious, with my chest open to a medical team and my life entirely in someone else's hands, my brother Marcus walked into Gerald Hutchins' office in downtown Columbus. He had a document with him. In my father's original will, the one Gerald had prepared 18 months earlier, the one Dad had described to me over coffee at that diner. The construction company and 70% of the estate went to me. Marcus received a separate financial settlement, generous, substantial, but not the company. The document Marcus brought to Gerald's office that Thursday morning told a different story.
In this version, the percentages had been reversed, and on the witness signature line, where my name was required to appear, where I was supposed to have signed in the presence of a notary, was my signature, my exact handwriting, my full legal name. A forgery so precise that, at a quick glance, even I might not have immediately known Marcus had been practicing. For how long, I still don't know. Gerald Hutchins did not file that document. He looked at it carefully. Then he looked at Marcus. Then he looked at the timestamp printed at the top of the page, 10:28 a.m. And he looked at Marcus again. He said very quietly, "Where is Sarah today?" Marcus said I was out of town, traveling for work. Gerald said nothing further. He accepted the document. He told Marcus he would review it and be in touch. The moment my brother walked out of that office, Gerald picked up his phone. He sent me 4 words. "We need to talk. Urgent." Gerald Hutchins had seen my real signature hundreds of times across 23 years of legal work. He had watched me sign documents since I was 18 years old. He knew my handwriting the way you know the face of someone you've worked beside for 2 decades. Something was wrong, and he was not going to process a single page until he spoke to me directly. I called him the morning after my surgery. I was still in the hospital bed, still groggy, still on controlled pain medication, the bandage on my back pulling tight every time I shifted position. He answered on the first ring. He didn't ask how the surgery went. He said, "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly." I said, "Okay." He said, "Were you in my office yesterday morning? Did you sign a document?" The room went completely still around me. I said, "Gerald, I was in surgery yesterday morning. I have been in this hospital since Wednesday night. I went under at 7:14 a.m. There was silence on his end. Long silence. Then he said, very quietly, "I see." Just those 2 words. But the way he said them, flat, certain, final, like a ledger line being closed. I understood everything in that moment. I didn't need him to explain a single detail. I understood the shape of what had happened as clearly as if I had watched it myself. I asked him one question. "Was it Marcus?" A shorter silence this time. "Come see me when you're released," Gerald said. "Don't call anyone. Don't say anything to anyone. Come directly to my office. I have everything we need." I did not call Marcus. I did not text him. I did not tell my father, who was still recovering from a difficult week of Parkinson's symptoms and did not need this news delivered through a hospital phone call. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell anyone. I lay in that hospital bed for 4 more days, healing, and I thought. I remembered the job sites. I remembered the blueprints. I remembered the diner and the coffee cup turning in circles on the table and my father's scarred hands of the 4 words. "You're the one who can actually do it." I remembered the hug from Marcus that lasted slightly too long. And then I waited. Gerald's office was a 20-minute drive from the hospital. My aunt drove me the Monday I was discharged. I still had a surgical dressing on my back and a prescription for pain medication I hadn't filled yet. I walked slowly through the lobby of his building, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and sat down across from him in the same chair I had sat in 100 times. He had a folder on his desk. He opened it without preamble. Inside was the document Marcus had brought him, the forged version of my father's will. Beside it was a time-stamped building security log showing Marcus entering Gerald's office at 10:28 a.m. and exiting at 10:51 a.m. on the day of my surgery. Beside that was a printed copy of my hospital admission records, showing my check-in Wednesday evening and my surgical window from 7:14 a.m. to 2:09 p.m. Thursday. The timestamps didn't overlap by minutes. They overlapped by hours. And in the upper corner of Gerald's desk, small, easy to miss, was a digital recorder. Gerald had recorded his entire conversation with Marcus, every single word, including the moment Marcus told him I was out of town, traveling for work. Finally, at the back of the folder was a 4-page report from a forensic document examiner Gerald had commissioned privately, comparing my authentic signature across 6 years of legal filings to the signature on the forged document. The report used words like practiced imitation and deliberate replication. It concluded with a single professional opinion. The signature on the submitted document was not produced by the same individual whose authentic samples are on file. Gerald folded his hands on the desk. He said, Your father's original will is fully intact. It was never modified. What Marcus brought me had no legal standing. I never filed it. I never will. I looked at the folder. He said, this recording, the building log, the hospital records, and the forensic analysis are all documented and preserved. What you choose to do with them is entirely your decision. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, I want to call a family dinner. Gerald's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something that looked in a man of 23 years of careful professional composure, almost like respect. He said, I'll be there. The dinner was the following Saturday at my parents' house. I cooked. I set the table with the good dishes. I wore a soft gray blouse because my back was still tender and I needed something loose. I moved carefully, and I smiled when Marcus arrived with a bottle of wine and pulled me into a hug in the doorway. You look great, he said. I'm so relieved you're okay. Thank you, I said. I'm so glad you came. We sat. We ate. My father told a story about his very first construction contract, the retaining wall job in 1983, the one he always told when he wanted to remind us where everything started. My mother laughed in the right places. Marcus refilled everyone's water glass without being asked. He was very relaxed. That was the thing I noticed most. He was completely, entirely relaxed. After the main course, I excused myself from the table. I came back with Gerald Hutchins. Marcus saw him in the doorway and went completely still. Not pale, not confused, not startled. Still, the way a person goes still when they understand with total clarity exactly what is happening, and realize there is nothing left to move toward. Gerald set the folder on the dining room table and opened it. He placed each document down, one at a time, without a word. The forged will, the building security log, the hospital admission records, the forensic analysis, the recording device, which he placed in the center of the table and pressed play. My brother's voice came through the small speaker, calm and cooperative, telling Gerald I was out of town, traveling for work. The timestamp on the recording read 10:31 a.m. My surgical record showed my incision was made at 7:22 a.m. I had been on that table for over 3 hours when Marcus sat across from Gerald Hutchins and told him I was traveling. My father picked up the hospital records first. He read them slowly. He was a man who had always read documents slowly, carefully, the way you read a contract before you sign it. He looked at my surgical window. He looked at the timestamp on the building log. He looked at the forensic report. He read the words practiced imitation twice. Then he looked at Marcus. He didn't say anything for a very long time. The only sound in the room was the refrigerator humming in the kitchen and a car passing slowly outside on the street. When my father finally spoke, his voice was the quietest I had ever heard it. He said, "Get out of my house." Marcus tried to speak. He said it was a misunderstanding. He said someone must have used his identity. He said Gerald had clearly made an error somewhere in the process. Gerald said, "Your voice is on this recording telling me Sarah was traveling. She was in surgery. You knew that because she told you herself the week before." Marcus looked at me. I looked back at him. I didn't say a single word. I didn't need to. The ledger was already balanced. Every entry accounted for. Every debt recorded. My father stood up from the table, slowly, with the careful deliberateness of a man managing a progressive illness, and he pointed at the front door. Marcus left. 3 months later, he was formally charged with fraud, forgery of a legal instrument, and attempted theft by deception. The construction company and its $4.7 million valuation listed as the intended target of the scheme. The evidence Gerald had preserved required almost no additional investigation. The recording. The building log against the hospital records. The forensic document analysis from a court-certified examiner. The prosecution called it one of the most thoroughly documented estate fraud cases the county had processed in years. My father's original will was never in question. It had never been altered. It was exactly what he had described to me over coffee at that diner. The conversation that Marcus had somehow sensed was happening, the one that had started his clock. The company remained exactly where Thomas Calloway had always intended it to go. I run it now. I come in every morning, and I sit at my father's desk. The same desk with the same scratched surface and the same squeaking second drawer that he never had fixed in 40 years. I read the project reports. I review the contracts. I make the decisions.
My father is still alive. He comes in twice a week when his symptoms allow, and he sits in the chair across from my desk and drinks his coffee and asks questions and occasionally tells me I'm doing something wrong, which I have decided to interpret as love. On the corner of my desk, I keep a small framed photograph. Me and Dad at a job site. 2009. I am 16 years old. I am wearing steel-toed boots that are slightly too big for me and squinting into the sun. Dad is standing beside me with his arm around my shoulder, pointing at something off camera, explaining something. I look like I am listening with my entire body. I was. Some mornings I look at that photograph and I think about 4 words on a hospital nightstand. We need to talk. Urgent. I think about how close it came. I think about Marcus in that leather chair downtown, calm and prepared, with my name practiced to perfection on a document designed to erase everything I had worked for. I think about the fact that Gerald Hutchins, a man my father had trusted for 23 years, looked at a forged signature and immediately knew it wasn't mine. And I think about something my father used to say at Sunday dinners, holding up his calloused, scarred 40-year-old hands. Don't ever take it for granted. I don't. I open my files. I start my day. And I build. Because that is what the Calloway family has always done. And now, finally, it is my name on the door. Tell me in the comments. Do you think I made the right decision going straight to the lawyer instead of confronting Marcus myself? And have you ever had a family member try to take something that was yours? I want to hear your story. I read every single comment, and if this story moved you, please subscribe to the Family Ledger. A new story drops every single day. Hit the bell so you never miss one.